Tonight, heavy rain and destructive winds pound southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales as residents brace for worse to come from Cyclone Alfred. Hello, I'm Guy Stayner. This is ABC News. Also tonight, salmon farms plead for support in the wake of unprecedented fish deaths. The Federal Environment Minister delays a decision on whether to approve the Robbins Island wind farm. And police allege a teenage boy who boarded a flight with a shotgun also made bomb threats. Cyclone Alfred is bearing down on Australia's east coast, with the worst of the weather still to come. Alfred is the first tropical cyclone to make a direct hit on Brisbane and the Gold Coast in more than 50 years. The storm is predicted to make first contact with land as a Category 2 system before heading inland. The impact will be felt along a 600-kilometre stretch of the coast from Queensland's Double Island Point to Yamba in New South Wales, bringing intense rainfall, destructive winds and wild seas. 4.5 million people live in the path of the storm. Life-threatening flash flooding is expected before the crossing. More than 80,000 homes are tonight without power, and up to 800 millimetres of rain is possible within the next 3 days. Our reporters are spread throughout New South Wales and Queensland tonight. We begin our coverage with Mark Willisey in Brisbane.
It's a threat not seen here in a generation. Ferocious winds ripping massive trees from their roots on the Gold Coast. The consequences devastating, with homes crushed by falling branches. Tens of thousands are without power and fearing what's still to come.
Not looking forward to tonight because we've got windows all around.
Scott Maxwell was lucky to escape uninjured when a huge tree fell on his Currumbin home.
I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning with a loud thud and the whole house shook.
The savage conditions taking even experienced hands off guard.
I'm used to cyclones, so I come from Magnetic Island, North Queensland, so Category 5. I wasn't worried about Category 2. I should have been.
The Gold Coast's famous beaches unrecognisable. Massive swells are gouging chunks out of the coastline, leaving a jagged wall of sand with a breathtaking drop.
We're all quiet, I think we're all in awe of what's happening right now.
Unbelievable what nature can do.
Structures now left exposed to the elements, and some hinterland roads are starting to go under. This lot will need a shower before they bunker down, potentially for a while.
It's possible that we're going to ask people to shelter for 24 to 36 hours.
One of the nation's most built-up regions is at the mercy of Tropical Cyclone Alfred. The storm's slow progress allowing for final walks and preparations in Brisbane this morning. After an agonising wait, most just want to see the back of it.
But now we're breathing deeply because the pause just adds a little bit more pressure.
We've both not been through anything like this before.
The power is probably the main concern.
City life has ground to a halt. The streets are mostly empty.
Humans rally in times of crisis, and people really have.
Potential projectiles have been corralled. Families are ready.
It's like you're waiting for a meal to come to the table and you're just sitting there waiting.
The Cyclone Alfred moves across the Moreton Bay Islands overnight. It's expected to weaken from a Category 2 to a Category 1 system before crossing the mainland tomorrow morning.
This will mean that destructive winds are unlikely for Brisbane itself, but damaging wind gusts to 120 kilometres per hour are expected.
While Alfred's slow pace has given southeast Queensland time to prepare, it comes with a sting in the tail. Authorities say it could take the tropical cyclone anywhere between 6 to 9 hours to cross the coast. In the process, it could dump life-threatening and dangerous flooding rains on low-lying areas. Rainfall totals for the event could reach 800 millimetres in some areas.
In this case, it is really large and slow moving, and that does represent the prospect of some significant rainfall.
Potentially exceed the levels we saw in the 2022 flood. And so if that is not a reason to take this seriously, I don't know what is.
Authorities expect to release water from the region's main dams in the coming days. Islands just off the coast are already being pounded. Kangaroos are fleeing. Hatchlings are off to a turbulent start.
But it's coming now, you can feel it's in the air.
It'll be a sleepless night for many, with more to come as the expected flood disaster unfolds. Mark Willisey, ABC News, Brisbane.
The damage from Cyclone Alfred is already visible on the New South Wales coast. Wild tides and storm surges are eroding some of the state's most popular beaches.
With Cyclone Alfred on their doorstep, communities on the edge of the ocean are securing what they can.
And it's roaring, absolutely roaring. So I've tied it all up, made sure everything will slash down, and yeah, it should be all right.
This is a serious issue for those communities, particularly low-lying communities close to the coast as well.
High tides and damaging surf are starting to erode Byron Bay's famed beaches.
When those waves have so much energy, that's when they actually need to lose some of their energy, and by that means they actually take that sand away from the beach.
So there has been coastal surges. There are still some considerable high tides that are occurring. A number of the beaches have been affected, but we're still very early in this cyclone hitting the sea.
As water levels rise, animals are also being displaced. This eel was rescued after washing into a gutter in Ballina.
You'll be lost there, mate.
While a turtle found itself lost on the streets of Benora Point.
I'll help you out, get you back in the water, safe.
Several major flood warnings have been issued for rivers between Port Macquarie and Tweed Heads. Coastal communities like Ballina will be first in line for a battering when Alfred arrives. Sandwiched between rivers and the ocean, the risk that floods could clash with a storm surge means that homes like these are particularly vulnerable. Sam Ryder moved into his home on the Richmond River just 4 weeks ago.
Like, the attitude from most of the people in this area is pretty casual, so we'll see what happens. It could be bad. We put the sandbags out just to kind of stop the wake and whatnot. Like, you'll never keep water out completely.
Other locals aren't so relaxed.
If that water comes down from Lismore and that surge is still here, good night.
One more restless sleep before the cyclone's long-anticipated arrival. Sean Turek-Goodwin, ABC News, Ballina.
We have reporters Laura Lavelle in southeast Queensland and Victoria Pengilly in northern New South Wales to bring us the latest. Laura, to you first, have conditions taken a turn for the worse in Brisbane?
They certainly have. Conditions here have ramped up considerably in Brisbane. The winds have become very strong, and we know the Gold Coast is also being pounded by dangerous wind gusts at the moment as well. Residents have now been asked to take shelter immediately if they haven't already, and be prepared to stay indoors for up to 36 hours. Today, 50,000 homes lost power. Many are still without, and no doubt more will lose power as Cyclone Alfred barrels onto the Queensland coast. Authorities say the next 24 hours for southeast Queenslanders is going to be difficult.
Well, let's bring in reporter Victoria Pengilly just over the border in Murwillumbah. Victoria, how are things where you are?
Look, it's been a wet and windy day here in Murwillumbah. The rain has been coming down pretty consistently. Much of the town lost power last night, and some phone towers have also gone out, which is an eerie sign of what's to come. There has been some minor flooding in low-lying areas, but the Tweed River is currently sitting at about 3 metres, which is still at minor flooding levels and well below the peak of 6.5 metres back in 2022. The real concern, though, now is that if this rain continues to fall, the water could breach the riverbanks and put hundreds of homes and businesses right in the firing line all over again.
Victoria Pengilly and Laura Lavelle, thank you both. With only hours till Alfred makes landfall, there are some severe weather conditions to be aware of. Here's what to expect in the coming days.
Well, before Cyclone Alfred makes landfall, wind gusts today recorded up to 120 kilometres per hour at Cape Byron. Peak waves off Brisbane climbed to nearly 17 metres yesterday, and more than 400 millimetres of rain has drenched Dorrigo in 48 hours. And the severe weather has been ongoing for most of the week, including more than 48 hours with peak waves exceeding 10 metres off Tweed Heads, and already 3 consecutive days with damaging wind gusts at Byron Bay. Tonight, Alfred is less than 100 kilometres offshore and is forecast to cross the Moreton Bay Islands overnight before reaching the mainland on Saturday. It's during this period when destructive gusts may occur just south of the eye on the coastal fringe, along with the highest threat of erosion when high tide occurs around 4 a.m. The wind and wave threat will gradually ease after landfall. However, for most regions, the worst impacts will arrive under Alfred's deluge of rain, hundreds of millimetres on Saturday alone, focused in on Brisbane, the Gold Coast and the Northern Rivers. And the latest modelling now has torrential falls persisting into Sunday, another 300 millimetres possible near the border, while heavy rain also spreads west and flooding is possible on the New South Wales northern slopes and ranges. The remnants of Alfred will finally shift south and spread heavy rain to Sydney by the time we hit Monday. By then, widespread flooding across both southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales.
ABC meteorologist Tom Saunders reporting there. Well, coming up, a special edition of 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson.
For our cyclone coverage, I'll be joined by the Prime Minister, the Premier of Queensland, David Crisafulli, and our reporters on the ground.
Salmon Tasmania has pleaded for understanding and support in the wake of an unprecedented mass mortality event, with the peak industry body promising it'll make changes for the future. State political reporter Lucy MacDonald joins us now. Lucy, do you think this will be enough to satisfy the industry's critics?
Well, Guy, one of the main criticisms these past few weeks has been a lack of transparency. Some feel that the public haven't been kept informed while a crisis has been unfolding in what we now know to be an unprecedented mass mortality event. Now, the state government clearly read the room early this week when Premier Jeremy Rockcliffe issued a warning to the industry, saying that it was on notice. That was echoed by Deputy Premier just today, who said while they back the industry, the government expects accountability and transparency. Now, to be clear, Salmon Tasmania has spoken on the issue before, but today we heard a statement from Chief Executive Luke Martin, who has apologised on behalf of the industry, saying it's devastated and doing everything it can to fix it. He's also promised that there will be changes in the future, but the statement has also left us with a lot of questions, like what could those changes possibly be? Is overstocking an issue? And if the causes of this are beyond their control, that's warmer waters and a new strain of microbe, can it really be prevented? So will it satisfy the critics? Probably not.
Did Salmon Tasmania have anything to say about evidence of animal cruelty in videos of live salmon being sealed in crates?
Yes, Mr Martin addressed the video, saying it was not normal operating procedure and it didn't meet the animal welfare standards expected of the industry. The Deputy Premier also described it as disturbing and pointed out that both the Environment Department and Huon Aquaculture itself are investigating.
Lucy MacDonald, thank you. Cyclone Alfred has scuppered the Prime Minister's hopes to call the federal election for the 12th of April. National Affairs correspondent Jane Norman has more.
The Prime Minister was planning to call the election on Sunday for April 12, but with the cyclone yet to make landfall, he's confirmed to the ABC he'll wait. An April election would have enabled the Prime Minister to avoid a budget and the disruption of campaigning through Easter, Anzac Day and school holidays. But it's not to be. Parliament is now set to return on March 25 for the Treasurer's fourth budget, with an election to follow in May.
I have no intention of doing anything that distracts from what we need to do. And what we need to do is to look after each other at this difficult time.
At this point, only one thing's for sure: the election has to be held by May 17.
The 17-year-old boy accused of bringing a shotgun onto a Jetstar flight yesterday allegedly said he had bombs in his bag before being tackled by witnesses. Operations at Avalon Airport near Geelong were back to normal today, but questions are mounting about how the extraordinary security breach was allowed to take place.
This is the incredible moment a teenager was detained on JQ 610 to Sydney. The pilot kicking the butt of a shotgun out of his reach after panicked crew and front row passengers realised he wasn't airport staff but an alleged gunman.
Obviously pretty scary and alarming.
I'd like to know how he got as far as he did.
Outrageous, and they're unacceptable.
According to court documents, the teenager stole 2 12-gauge shotguns and a rifle from Turallo yesterday. The unsupervised learner driver is alleged to have travelled along Beach Road in Avalon before police say he entered a breach in the fence 2 kilometres west of the airport terminal and made his way to the plane. Once on board, saying, "I've got bombs in my bag," police say those bombs were fake.
Certainly our cabin manager asked the right questions as the gentleman hopped on the aircraft because she thought it was unusual.
The airport was off limits into the night. When morning broke, passengers returned. They were met with beefed up security, but it's still unclear why the breach wasn't detected sooner.
I don't want to get into the detail of any of the security issues, but we are confident that Avalon is working to address all these issues.
Australian airports are very safe and secure environments. We process 120 million customer movements a year in and out of our airfields, the big airports as well as our regional gateways.
We allegedly have an individual that can walk across the tarmac and onto a plane armed.
The 17-year-old is now facing a series of charges, including unlawfully taking control of an aircraft. He was remanded in custody today. No bail application was made. His alleged motive just one of a number of unanswered questions as investigations continue. Jesse Thompson, ABC News.
There was relief for King Island residents today with news the island's famous dairy has been sold after more than a year on the market. Last September, Canadian company Saputo announced it would close the cheesemaker this year because it was unable to find a buyer. With 58 workers, the dairy is the island's biggest employer. Today, in a letter sent to staff, Saputo announced it's entered into a binding agreement to sell the business to newly formed entity King Island Dairy 2, led by 2 Melbourne businessmen. The letter said workers would receive an offer to transfer their employment to the new owner. A decision on whether a controversial wind farm on Tasmania's northwest coast can go ahead has been deferred for another 2 months. The delay means the final call on the Robbins Island wind farm might fall to the next federal government.
Another delay for the proposed Robbins Island wind farm. Federal Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek will not decide its fate until at least May 9, angering both supporters and opponents of the project.
She has a responsibility, we believe, to decline it.
Steve Pilkington's group, the Circular Head Coastal Awareness Network, has fought against the project and lost in the courts. They believe it should not be approved under the country's biodiversity law.
It's there to protect biodiversity, and Robbins Island's a haven of biodiversity.
But a renewable energy advocate wants to see it built as soon as possible.
It's a great project for Tasmania, provides on-island energy, but also provides energy, it will provide energy to go into the Marinus Link project and help decarbonise the nation.
The deferral comes in the wake of a recent study into an endangered bird species. A spokesperson for the Federal Environment Department said, "Additional time is needed to ensure all relevant information for this complex decision is thoroughly considered, in particular new scientific analysis about the migration of the critically endangered orange-bellied parrot." ACEN Australia, the company behind the wind farm, remains optimistic it will be green-lit despite the delay. Managing Director David Pollington called it a transformative opportunity for Tasmania's renewable energy future. With a federal election looming and further possible legal challenges, the project's future is anything but certain. Sandy Powell, ABC News.
Ukraine's president says he will send negotiators to Saudi Arabia for talks with US officials after the White House suspended crucial military aid. Mr Zelensky has met with EU leaders who've unanimously agreed to boost defence spending to support Kyiv's fight against Russia. Europe correspondent Zoe Ford reports from Brussels.
A warm welcome in the middle of a funding freeze. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky arrives in Brussels after a gruelling week, thanking European Union leaders for their support.
You made a strong signal to
Ukrainian people, to Ukrainian warriors, to civilians, to all our families, and it's great that we are not alone.
The 27 EU countries unanimously backed plans to free up billions of dollars for defence following marathon talks, just days after the United States paused funding and support for Kyiv.
We are coming out of this European Council very determined to ensure Europe's security and to act with the scale, the speed and the resolve that this situation demands.
The Ukrainian president has also confirmed he'll send negotiators to Saudi Arabia next week for talks with US officials. He's vowing to work constructively with the Trump administration.
Ukraine wants to make a deal because I don't think they have a choice. I also think that Russia wants to make a deal because in a certain different way that only I know, they have no choice either.
26 of the 27 EU leaders at this summit voiced their support for Kyiv, insisting there can be no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine and promising to continue the supply of aid. There wasn't consensus because, as expected, Hungary's Viktor Orban refused to join them. He supports Donald Trump's plan for direct talks with Moscow.
The policy of President Trump in that respect is more than right.
Meanwhile, Russian forces are continuing to advance through Ukraine's Donetsk region, shelling the city of Kramatorsk and claiming they've captured another village. Ukraine putting out fires one battle at a time. Mazoe Ford, ABC News.
Pope Francis has thanked well-wishers in an audio message he recorded in hospital. As Michelle Rimmer reports, the message came after doctors confirmed the Pope's condition had remained stable for a third consecutive day.
The message came as a surprise to well-wishers who had gathered for a nightly prayer service for Pope Francis here at St Peter's Square. The message, which was recorded in Spanish by the 88-year-old pontiff earlier in the day, was played to the crowd and was met with applause.
Agradezco de todo corazón las oraciones.
In the message, Pope Francis thanked those that had been praying for his recovery and he said that he is with them. He also wished blessings upon them. This is the first time that the pontiff's voice has been heard since he entered Rome's Gemelli Hospital 3 weeks ago. He still hasn't been seen in public. In its latest medical update, the Vatican said that his condition has stabilised. That's after he suffered 2 respiratory crises earlier this week. He was initially admitted to hospital with bronchitis, but is now known to be battling pneumonia in both of his lungs. His doctors have told us not to expect daily medical updates, which we've been receiving up until now. That's because his condition has been stable for a number of days and they no longer deem a running commentary of his treatment necessary. Despite these seemingly positive signs, however, the Vatican says that his prognosis is still guarded, which means that they're not confident that he's out of danger yet.
Michelle Rimmer reporting. The operators of a new hydrogen facility in Hobart hope it will encourage the development of a commercial market for renewable fuel. The site in Lutana hosts one of Australia's largest electrolysers, which splits purified water into hydrogen and oxygen. The Blue Economy Cooperative Research Centre says the electrolyser is powered by renewable electricity, meaning it produces so-called green hydrogen, which can replace fossil fuels, including diesel. It's hoped the site can transition from a research facility to commercial production in the future.
By demonstrating that we can produce hydrogen safely here in Tasmania and can partner with our end users with offtake agreements shows industry that it's possible and feasible.
It was another bruising day for markets, which continue to react badly to President Trump's sudden shifts in trade policy. The Australian market hit a 6-month low. Here's David Chow.
Well, Donald Trump's policy announcements are kind of like turning on and turning off a light switch. The US president now wants to delay his 25% tariffs on most Mexican goods and some Canadian imports for about a month. And that's on top of yesterday's decision to give car makers a 1-month exemption from those tariffs. But investors are just over it. All that uncertainty and the constant backflipping, that led to the local share market falling by a pretty steep 1.8% today, with tech, banking and healthcare among the worst performing stocks. And when you zoom out, you can see the ASX is now at its lowest level in 6 months. Overseas, things were looking pretty ugly for Wall Street and the FTSE as well, though Chinese markets bucked the trend. Now, you can really see the pessimism on Wall Street's tech index. The Nasdaq is down 10% from its record high, so it's officially a correction. But that's nothing compared to Tesla, which has lost half its value in 3 months. Its EV sales have been falling quite sharply these past few months in Australia, Europe and even California, where its headquarters used to be. Although Elon Musk's tilt towards right-wing politics has cost him billions, don't worry, he's doing all right. Meanwhile, gold is down slightly, oil prices are near a 3-year low, and the Aussie dollar has slipped to 63 US cents. But it's nothing quite as dramatic as Bitcoin. The original cryptocurrency jumped when President Trump signed an executive order to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But it quickly fell again when people found out this reserve will be funded exclusively by Bitcoin that US authorities have already seized from criminals. So it seems taxpayers won't be footing the bill. And that's finance.
The 2025 AFL season begins tonight with the Swans hosting the Hawks for opening round. Then on Sunday, Collingwood takes on Greater Western Sydney in the only other match of the cyclone-affected fixture.
Sunny skies at Pies training, a complete contrast to the rain waiting for them in Sydney.
We'd like to think our game style doesn't really matter if it's wet or dry.
Braden Maynard will make the trip. The defender has put a foot injury behind him. He's a crucial part of the backline, which will also feature all-Australian midfielder Josh Dacos.
The game now requires you to hit targets out of D50, otherwise you're in trouble. And to have Josh and then, futuristically have Dan Houston there, there'll be a couple of weapons.
Ready for whatever the forecast throws, the Pies will take a full squad to Sydney. Tim Membry is set to make his club debut in the forward line, and Harry Perriman will line up in the midfield.
He's such a good transitional runner, and just over the pre-season prepping for that, knowing he can go back and play those defensive roles for us.
And a reunion awaits Perriman when he faces the team he left last season.
I'm sure he'll be focused on his role and his job within the Collingwood team, and our boys will be focused. I'm sure there'll be a few hugs after the game though.
Far from a surprise, the Giants are likely to hand Toby Bedford a role on Nick Dacos.
He's certainly one that we'll look very closely at, and Toby's the obvious one to go to him.
Joining the club in 2023, James Leake will make his debut. The 19-year-old battled a quad injury for most of last year, but has been rewarded for a strong summer.
Leakey, your debut.
The forward line will be without injured duo Jesse Hogan and Jake Stringer. It leaves Aaron Cadman as the Giants' spearhead. 30 goals from 23 games last year. It's his time to stand up. Alexia Pesce, ABC News.
A painting of a landscape familiar to Hobart motorists has taken out this year's Glover Prize. Hobart artist Aisha Sherman-North won the top honour and $80,000 in prize money for her painting Weeping Birches on the Avenue. She says the entry depicts the Brooker Highway outside the window of her home. The Glover Prize was founded in 2004 and is considered Australia's leading landscape art award. To the weather, and tonight's photo of sunset at Bruny Island is from Brian Corrie. And can you have a Neapolitan sky that's not over Naples? Certainly looks like Neapolitan ice cream to me. It was a gorgeous day around the state. Ouse had a maximum of 28 degrees, Launceston 27. It was a little cooler about the coast. Hobart, Burnie and St Helens all had 22. The satellite image shows Alfred sending storms over northern New South Wales and the Gold Coast. More than 150 millimetres have fallen on the Gold Coast in the last 24 hours. By comparison, Tasmania's weather is much ado about nothing. Tomorrow we're in for another day of light winds that will gradually come more from the northeast as Cyclone Arthur begins to track inland. Across the country tomorrow, a few showers in Sydney, a possible shower in Darwin, but fine elsewhere, hot in Melbourne and Adelaide. Back home, it will be fine apart from possible light showers in the north, most likely about the ranges, with patchy morning fog about the north and east. It's looking perfect across the northwest, 24 degrees in Devonport, Burnie 23, Strawn 26, up to 28 degrees in Launceston after a low of 14, St Helens 24, Swansea 27, and Hobart's heading for a partly cloudy day with a top of 25 degrees after a low of 12. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 3 minutes to 7. On coastal waters, there'll be east to northeasterly winds of 10 to 20 knots, reaching up to 25 knots about the far northwest and the east of Flinders Island. There is a heatwave warning this weekend for parts of the northwest and the northeast. Sunday will be fine apart from light showers about the north that are more likely about the northeast. Monday, showers will develop about the south and east and extend to most other districts during the day. And looking ahead, we're in for a warm week next week with just a chance of a shower on Wednesday and Friday. And that's it for this evening's program. There'll be live coverage of the cyclone situation on the news channel starting at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Up next is Sarah Ferguson with a 7:30 special. Good night.